Unit 3, Gender in American History. The concept of gender has been a progression toward equality in American history. Gender is a concept that can be described as more than just the sex of an individual. Rather, it is how a person defines their roles in society. Traditionally, the male gender was considered the alpha, or the moneymakers, and the female gender were the housewives and mothers to children. For the majority, this is no longer the case, for women in particular. There has been a revolution for the female gender in fighting for equality over the years. I will discuss how times have changed and how the United States' views have shifted its traditional ideas on gender and societal cultural norms. Jack Halberstam's essay, Gender, is a discussion on how gender is much more than biological or a social marker of difference. Yet, it also names a primary mode of oppression that sorts human bodies into binary categories in order to assign labor, responsibilities, moral attributes, and emotional styles. Because of past traditions, dating back hundreds of years, there has been a blatant separation of the sexes. Standards were set in place on how each gender should conduct themselves. In the 16th and 17th centuries, based on societal norms, women had clear roles. They were to get married, have children, and take care of the household. According to Elizabeth Freeman's essay Marriage, U.S. women who married were femme converts with no legal existence independent from that of their husbands. Many feminists viewed this as a form of slavery, as women had little to no say on matters outside of the house. They were not allowed to work or educate themselves, and those that did were frowned upon. This caused forced dependence and oppression of the female gender. However, in the late 1700s, there was a woman named Martha Ballard who seemed to break through the gender role. She was married with children and held a job as a midwife. In one of her diary entries she writes, "My girl spun 23 double skins and wove 29 yards last week, and did the housework besides, and Mr. Ballard has been fixing the loom. Although everyone in her family performed a certain role, it is Martha who stands out. She played many roles, including mother, wife, midwife, weaver, and planter. This was all during a time where women were to be subservient to their husbands. It appears her and her husband were following their own standards." We begin to see a clear increase in the fight for gender equality beginning in the late 1800s into the early 1900s. This was called the Progressive Era. According to the Library of Congress, women and women's organizations not only worked to gain the right to vote, they also worked for broad-based economic and political equality and for social reforms. Women began to make strides in the fight to be co-equal to the male gender. The ratified 19th Amendment in the 1920s gave women the right to vote. According to our text, all of the changes that took place in the women's lives during the 20th century, one of the most significant was women's increasing ability to control fertility. This allowed women to now have a choice and not just be women at home having and rearing children. Women were now allowed to work and earn a wage, educate themselves, and participate as citizens of society. We can also see the move toward progress in the image by the Library of Congress depicting a woman receiving the National Women's Suffrage Association banner from a male member of the Men's League. This shows recognition and the beginning of acceptance and respect for the female gender. Women's liberation and suffrage movements proved effective, as during the 1960s and 70s, the number of working women climbed to 42%, according to our text. There were also gains in education, especially for women who were enrolled in law and medical school. As we look at today's society, there has been a successful integration of gender roles, especially for women. Women now hold power and authority, are successful in business, are educated, and continue to hold the tradition of homemaking. Catherine Beecher writes, "Hence it is that women of America, who often exhibit a masculine strength of understanding and a manly energy, generally preserve great delicacy of personal appearance, and always retain the manners of woman, although they sometimes show that they have the heart and minds of men." Women were seen in a different light during and after World War II, as many filled the roles of men in the workforce while they went overseas to fight. The famous Rosie the Riveter was a campaign used to bring women out to help the war effort. Women have proven to be resilient and excel in multitasking. It has now become acceptable to co-provide for your family financially. One of the most significant views on the progress of the female gender is the past presidential election, in which Hillary Clinton was one of the top candidates in the race. Although she didn't win, This shows us that women are empowered. However, it is important to note that even with this progression, women still have to overcome additional barriers because of their gender. The discussion on gender is a continuous evolution. In a male-dominant society, there has undoubtedly been substantial movements for the female gender throughout history.